it will not qualify for making the thesis acceptable to the research community unless it also contains critical review of previous research studies, so that that will help you in identifying and defining the research gap. And ultimately, you'll come to know whether your chosen area of research or the area which you intend to take up is unresearched or under-researched or even over-researched. Therefore, this review of literature is very, very crucial, and it should contain critical review of literature. Then most of the research scholars lack what you call, they are unable to chalk out the conceptual framework guiding the current research study. It's a kind of blueprint, or it will give you a roadmap how to take this process further forward to arrive at a meaningful and conclusive end. It means, for example, it could be a job satisfaction or market segmentation, whatever it is, any topic. In that way, we require two definitions. One is conceptual definition, what it is and what is not, so that everyone will understand in the same way as decided by the researcher. So conceptual foundation or the conceptual meaning of various key terms used in the title and also in the entire thesis must be clearly described. Then the other definition is operational definition. Operational definition is that definition which will clarify about the process of measuring and assessing that phenomenon in practice in a real life research context. Therefore, conceptual and operational definitions are very, very important in our roadmap. Ultimately, as Stephen R. Covey rightly said in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in your mind before you begin your research process. Understand what is your ultimate aim. What is the central purpose of pursuing your doctoral research? Otherwise, you will be groping in dark. You'll be missing the wood and all those things, So it means I cannot see the forest because of trees. That kind of conceptual ambiguity, all those things are there. Again, Stephen R. Covey says, everything will be created twice in this world. First in your mind, next in the physical world. Therefore, we need to be very clear about what we are trying to do. Then, most of the research scholars are unable to highlight the significance of pursuing the doctoral research in their current domain. It means justification for having taken up a particular area or particular topic. So it means ultimately we must be in a position to put forth our own contributions in the end in the form of implications and other utility component. And while using statistical tools and techniques, the scholars must be very careful about the relevance, because when you open up SPSS software, you will come across more than 1,000 tests. It happens in many times, analysis by paralysis. Indiscriminately using statistical tools and techniques, we are complicating the entire process. Sometimes a particular test is not required. For the heck of it, we are using it, and confusion gets confounded, and we are creating unwanted confusion in the entire process. Therefore, whether a particular test is required, whether it is suitable based on our research design, whether it will assist the researcher in simplifying and communicating the research findings to the larger audience, that's very, very important. That makes a lot of sense. Then another important gray area or a troublesome area is formulation and testing of research hypothesis. I have come across some scholars who will be in a position to formulate and define the research hypothesis after completing their PhD writing, thesis writing. It's a kind of backward induction. It shouldn't happen like that, because based on inductive logic or deductive logic, we must be able to formulate the research hypothesis. Formulation of research hypothesis must indicate the sources from where we are getting the hypothesis. Normally, while adjudicating the thesis, we want to know where did you get the hypothesis from, whether it is from the theoretical framework, because the theoretical framework you will come across several propositions. All propositions cannot be converted into hypothesis. Testable hypothesis must be relevant to our current field of investigation. Then accept, reject decision. Then linkage of these hypotheses to our research questions, objectives, the research methodology. Then in the last chapter, normally we would like to know the summary of your hypothesis, the inferences drawn, the implications for the research community. Sometimes we may concur with the previous research findings, all right. If you reject the hypothesis based on the statistical testing, and you do not concur with the previous research findings as indicated by the review of literature, then you must clearly specify the cross findings and because of what reasons you are not getting the concurrent results as indicated by the previous researchers. So probably because of this or that, we must be indicating what you call convincing reasons for getting mixed findings or contradictory result findings as compared to the research findings of the previous researchers. Then the layout of the thesis or the chapter schemes. Normally, a good thesis will contain some 7 chapters. A bulky thesis may contain 9 chapters. A very minimum thesis may contain 5 chapters. Whatever it is, the ideal thesis, as per the standard norm, it should be within 275 pages to 300 pages. Otherwise, we call it a bulky thesis when it exceeds 300 pages. Because a good thesis must be qualitatively sound. To justify the quality, there should be quantity, so that they can substantiate the entire process and the results of the findings, immediate result, and the end outcomes of our research investigation. To cut the long story short, as far as the chapterization or the layout of the thesis is concerned, normally I say that there should be a meaningful beginning, constructive middle, and conclusive end. Sometimes in the thesis you don't find all the 3. That will create only heat but no light. Therefore, it should be a balanced thesis so that it can make a lot of sense. Then the last chapter, we would like to see, are you giving any directions for future or further research? Because you depend upon previous researchers while performing review of literature. So you picked up the baton from the previous researchers, and in a relay race, you have to leave the baton at the end by indicating certain specific directions for further research or future research based on your own research experience. That's very, very important. Then also we want to know what is the scope of your research investigation. Definitely every research investigation has got inherent limitations. These limitations will serve as opportunities for further research by future researchers. Invariably, while defining the scope of your research and also indicating certain limitations or inherent defects applicable to all kinds of research, you must also indicate the utility of your research. And ultimately, theory, research, and practice are analogous to a 3-legged stool. One without the other is totally meaningless and atrocious. Your research contributions must be able to fine-tune the existing theoretical models. It must also indicate the original research contributions, and it must advise the practitioners how to improve upon their management practice so that your research will become more useful and more relevant than ever before. And in the last chapter, we would like to see the conclusion. What are our concluding remarks based on your experience? Ultimately, what I'm trying to impress upon you is that, PhD is only a license to do research. Once you obtain your doctoral research in a systematic and scientific manner, then it is not the end of your academic journey. Ultimately, we are embracing lifelong learning because we are in the community of practice and we are living in a learning society. Therefore, continuous learning, improvement, and development should be our virtue. The moment we get doctorate, it should be used properly for the betterment of the society at large. And we must also guide the research scholars and others who are badly in need of the assistance. And another confession of mine, based on my small research experience, is that, there is no perfect researcher in this world. Just like there is no perfect driver in this world, you cannot expect perfection from any researcher. As a matter of fact, then a researcher should focus on not perfection, but excellence. As Aristotle has rightly said, excellence is not an act, but a habit. We have to put our best foot forward to make things happen in the way it is required. Therefore, the point is, PhD is not the end of your academic journey. It's only the beginning. Therefore, we have to focus more on meaningful research publications in refereed. It means double-blind review, or at least in reputed journals. Don't keep quiet after obtaining PhD, because if you keep quiet or if you're academically dormant after obtaining PhD, you are doing more damage than any good to the academic community. Sorry to say that. Therefore, you have to engage in academic activities, particularly applying for research projects with the help of the funding agencies, and bringing out some research publications, and participating in seminars, workshops, and conferences, so that you can make your points very clear and you can make your contributions reach larger audience, so that it will create both heat and light in the academic world. Before applying for research projects, you must know where you are good at. It means unless you think in terms of identifying a particular area where you can contribute substantially, there is no point in approaching funding agencies. Then you must be oriented, and also you must be made aware of available funding agencies, their funding norms, their recommendations and restrictions. We should fall in line with the mainstream, and we must get proper guidance from the senior faculty and senior researchers as to how to write the project proposals. Otherwise, there is a rigorous process of screening project proposals nowadays, and the National Education Policy 2020 talks about a rigorous screening of research proposals, so that only the deserving people will get funding, and the research will be very meaningful, societally useful, and help the research community. Therefore, research guidance, it means, you will also apply for recognition for becoming a research guide. Then research guide and research supervision is neither a child's play nor Sunday gardening. It requires a lot of commitment on the part of the research supervisor, not only on the part of the research candidate or the researcher, but more importantly on the research guide. Sometimes the research methodology workshops are required for the research supervisors. That is what I earnestly feel. That is the requirement today. So it means research guidance is a kind of teamwork. The research guide should motivate the researcher and get motivated, get inspired. It's always a two-way traffic. That is what, three things are very, very important in research. That's a teamwork, I told you already. So it means IAP. I means inspiration, A means aspiration, P means perspiration. The research scholar and the research guide must be inspired to do a meaningful, ethically sound, and qualitative research piece, research contribution. This inspiration must be connected to the aspiration of the researcher, so that the researcher, he or she, will gear up to turn out a good piece of research work. All these things will require what we call perspiration, perseverance, high quality of endurance, so that you can continue to perform in the way it is required. So inspiration, aspiration, and perspiration. No pains, no gains. That should be the things, because sometimes in the research scholars will be always after shortcuts without knowing that they will cut them short. Therefore, the process of doing research is more important than the result of the research contribution. Therefore, we should be very much concerned about the rigorous process of pursuing the doctoral research, because sometimes, the research scholars lack higher order critical thinking skills, and they also require mentoring by the research guide or somebody else. And independent thinking is required, because you will get the data, primary data or secondary data. It should be converted to information later on into knowledge, and knowledge into wisdom. So it means research scholars must interact with fellow researchers and other research supervisors and the research community through discussions and dialogues, but never entertain arguments, because arguments will create only heat but no light. And ultimately, relationship management is very, very important. Sometimes, as Vice Chancellor, many scholars apply for change of guides. Sometimes guides will complain about their researchers. And so many things, there are certain gray areas. Ultimately, what we are trying to say that, relationship management is very, very important. Today, management is nothing but relationship management. All said and done, candidate and research supervisor should not become strange bedfellows. They should become constructive partners in producing a meaningful, ethically sound, qualitative, socially relevant, contemporary piece of research work. Ultimately, that requires what I always tell about competency of the research guide and the competency of the researcher. So it means KASHV, KASHV. K stands for knowledge, A means attitude, S means skills, requisite and relevant skill mix, H means habits, V means values. So K means domain-specific application-oriented knowledge, A means positive mental attitude, then S means requisite research skills. Skills are very, very important. Should acquire and build on the existing skills. You have to hone the skills and fine-tune the skills so that you can do your research in the meaningful manner. Then the habits of engaging in the research process are very, very important. Are we cultivating right habits, or are we following a wrong path? The choice is ours, and we have to be very careful about cultivating positive result-oriented research habits. And finally, V is nothing but values, because values left in our researchers will touch their destiny more than valuables left to them. That should be born in our mind, so that KASHV will convert any qualified researcher into competent researcher, any qualified recognized guide into a competent research guide. Then, to conclude, I say that any research process, whether it is doctoral research or any other research process, must be time-bound and target-oriented. Otherwise, you will not be able to conclude it. Your research investigation must have a timeline, so that you will not be missing the target, and you can do it in a very systematic and scientific manner. And you should also reach the larger audience, because after obtaining your PhD degree, your PhD thesis must be fine-tuned, and it should be published in the form of a reference book, so that it will reach the larger audience. It should not be preserved in only archives, so that it will reach. And in the end, ultimately, all said and done, be positive, believe in yourself, and two things are very, very important, two attributes. One is adaptability or flexibility with the changing times, based on the changing circumstances. Unless we fine-tune ourselves, we will not be fit and fine to perform the process. Then another one is agility, rising from the ashes, like a phoenix bird. We will come across several odds against us. Sometimes, we feel like dropping the idea of continuing our research endeavor, research activity. We will find fault with others. Enemy always lies within. You are the creator of your own destiny, as Swami Vivekananda rightly said. So it means agility is very, very important. Even in times of crisis or difficulties, adversity quotient is very, very important. COVID-19 pandemic taught us this very important point. Today, it is not IQ. It is not even emotional intelligence quotient. It is not even spiritual quotient. but more importantly, adversity quotient is very, very important. And adversity is nothing but, the research scholars and the research supervisors will come across several odds against us, several trying circumstances. Under such things, without losing their heart, they should rise from the ashes, and they should continue to perform in the way it is required. Therefore, we should not miss the rigor of doing a good quality of research work. Best wishes to all the participants who joined on the virtual mode. I congratulate and again commend the efforts of the organizers, particularly Dr. Sridhar Shetty and his team. Thank you very much for your time and opportunity. Jai Hind.